Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's time once again for one of our ism segments, it being a Tuesday, and I thought today that we would cover something that is less of an ideology, though often driven by ideology, and more of a practice, and that is what we call terrorism. 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 Terrorism has been in the news of late as our president has been suggesting that the deepest threat to American security and well-being are American nationalistic terrorists, though there seems to be precious little evidence that such things even exist. I suppose that the events of January 6th would be the closest thing that could be trotted out as evidence of this. But I think it's important, as I've been arguing all along, that we actually be pretty careful about establishing what we mean when we use a particular word. One could argue that, and in fact people have argued that whether we look at a group of people as rebels or freedom fighters probably says more about who has our political allegiance than any objective difference between these two groups. That is, we look in our own history at our founding fathers, as at the Minutemen, as the Continental Army, as heroic freedom fighters. But from the position and perspective of Great Britain, they can look at them as rebels. Well, we can sometimes use that word terrorism in the same way. Terrorists are those who don't fight wars politely. In fact, there are those who would argue that the British would look at the founding fathers as terrorists because of their sort of style of warfare, which would involve things like not marching in the middle of the field and standing there, but shooting and firing from behind rocks and trees and things like that. Well, I would argue that's not terrorism at all. It's not anything like terrorism. What defines terrorism is not the ideology of the one fighting. It's not the ideology of the one being fought against. The defining quality of terrorism, friends, is that the terrorist seeks to secure whatever political agenda they might have by causing terror in the civilians of a given culture. And they seek to cause that terror through harm against those civilians. Let me put it to you this way. Let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that the conspirators of 9/11 had determined that on that particular day they were going to harm the United States, and they sent trained pilots to take Saudi Arabian fighter aircrafts to come and shoot down a bunch of Air Force and Navy and Marine and Army pilots who were out flying through the skies and training or whatever. That if they came and shot down a bunch of our warplanes, and even if they'd killed twice as many people as they killed in doing so, this would not be terrorism. This would be soldiers fighting against soldiers. In the same way, if the United States in retaliating against those who perpetrated 9/11, decided to intentionally go out into the Middle East, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq, and bomb civilian targets, we would be the ones guilty of terrorism. Once again, just to be abundantly clear, the defining quality of terrorism is the targeting of non-combatants in war. It's the targeting of non-combatants in war. And when I say in war, I mean, in terms of fighting against other people. So the idea is we're not coming after you soldiers who've signed up for warfare. We're coming after the citizens who have not signed up for warfare, and we're going to harm them, and we're going to hope that they will create enough political pressure on your political institutions to get what we want. That's what terrorism is. It's not a legitimate form of warfare, no matter who's doing it. Just war is not only a war that's being fought for just reasons, it's a war that's being fought justly, which means that you don't target civilians. I would argue that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were both terrorist attacks, as well as the firebombing of Tokyo and the firebombing of Dresden. These were not military targets per se. Now, I'm willing to grant that things can get fuzzy, that when you have a factory that's building all sorts of weapons for war and there's lots of people around there, I get that. But there's a fundamental difference between collateral damage and intentional damage. So let's define our terms well. Let's use them well. Let's be careful. Terrorism is the act of war against non-combatants. It's time once again for another one of our Curating Your Movie Library segments, which means I have across the aisle from me my precious wife and my partner in movie watching. And today I'd like to talk about a movie that is a little bit old. I don't know, maybe 15 years old. And not a lot of people, I think, remember it. But I liked it when I actually saw it. Mm-hmm. It's one of those movies where I thought, wow, I enjoyed this. I'm going to share it with Lisa. Let's see how she feels about it, even though it's probably not a genre that's right up your alley. The movie's called Reign of Fire, mm-hmm. Reign of Fire, and it is a story about dragons. Mm. And it stars one of my very, very favorite actors of all time, who I feel like I could watch him in anything. And that is Mr. Matthew McConaughey, who, I mean, you've heard me, dear.
I don't think his part in this movie was what we usually see, or maybe much of him, actually.
No, it was an early role for him, and a smaller role. But in some ways, it was consistent with his kind of shtick, in the sense that he was a kind of an arrogant fella. And so let me lay the basic premise down for you. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic movie, and the apocalypse that this comes after is the release of dragons that's pretty much destroyed most of the world. Mm-hmm. It was an accidental discovery when work was being done on the subway system in London. Mm-hmm. And so you see that discovery, and the main hero was a little boy, mm-hmm. on the very day that happened, and watched his mother die. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward, 20 years or so, maybe 30 years, and you have this band of people trying to continue to survive, and kind of in hiding, mm-hmm. from the dragons. And then now shows up Matthew McConaughey and his band of dragon hunters, and there's this conflict between those who want to stay put and hide, and those who want to sort of conquer and go forth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are comfortable giving a sort of overview of how you felt about it. Did you like it?
I enjoyed it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. It was a lot of action, a lot of drama. Sometimes I had to say, now, what? Like, I have to ask you, they kind of lost me a few times, but it might have been that I tuned out.
It could have been. Maybe you were playing a word on Words with Friends with me or something.
Maybe, I don't know. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was good.
Yeah. I thought, in a sense, pretty actiony. Mm-hmm. It's more.
There's a lot of history.
Yeah, what's going on and trying to live in this world. Mm-hmm. It's not, let's find 7 different ways to show how to kill a dragon.
Right.
And so I appreciated that about it. Now, one complaint I had about it is it was really, really dark. Not in terms of the mood, though that would be true too, but just the lighting on the screen.
Wow. And that was probably one of the reasons that I struggled with it a little bit. Because in our bedroom, if our lights are off, it dims the TV, so it's even doubly dark. Yeah. It was just harder to see, because if you were missing some action, you're not sure what you were missing.
Yeah. Yeah. But that said, I think they did a very nice job with the dragons and the dragon hunting and again, the sort of the drama of people trying to figure out what to do and trying to protect the kids and the kids coming up and what's going to happen in their future. And if you remember, another big part of the struggle, even before the dragon hunters showed up, was a struggle with leadership, because there were people who wanted to harvest what they were trying to grow before it was done, and that created all sorts of drama and uncertainty about who was in charge. But I like too, one of the things I like about those kinds of movies, dear, is the camaraderie that can happen when you're facing hardship and challenge. Another one I asked you to watch when I first found it on a streaming service that we have was The 13th Warrior. Which I think we probably did cover. But it was a similar kind of situation where people are being overwhelmed and people are having to work together to try and fight that. I don't know why it didn't do better. Like I said, it was enough for me, not only that I wanted you to see it, but I was happy to watch it again. I'm generally not a watch it again guy as much as you're a watch it again person. But
it depends what
right, obviously there's some that none of us want to watch again, and there are a few that all of us want to watch again and again. But there's your list of watch again is longer than my list of watch again.
You think?
Well, yes and no. On the other hand, my list of I forgot I already watched it is much longer than your list.
Honey, we watched that. Honey, the 5th time. We watched that.
Yep.
We did? Yep, just turn it on. Prove to yourself.
Well, but it goes the other way, too.
No.
Yeah, there are times. Honey, we watched it. No, dear, we didn't. Yes, we did. Remember? No, we didn't watch this. Yeah, so we both have our own propensities. Yes, and our own forgetfulness. Well, I'm not sure what we'll look at again. We've been struggling lately.
I think that we've been going through Victoria.
Right.
Virgin River just started, so we're taking that slow because that season just can get swallowed up really quickly.
Yep.
We've got the Durrells that we're still finishing.
Yep.
We haven't fully finished Grantchester. We kind of lost interest after the first gentleman left.
Right.
And of course, The Mentalist broke my heart. I had to take a sabbatical for a while because it was just really, after 7 seasons, was good. But we'll find some.
We're waiting for the crown.
Yeah, and I think we're just supposed to just kind of, go with what we have right now and enjoy that.
But now would be a really good time to ask our listeners if they've got some suggestions for us.
What do you guys think? What have you been watching that's fun?
Yeah, we like romantic comedies. We like mysteries, which now I'm learning to search more for mysteries than thrillers. I still really like thrillers, but I know they're not gentle enough.
I don't mind thrillers. I just don't like gore.
Yeah, right.
So,
but mysteries kind of feed that thing inside me that Thrillers feeds without the gore.
Yeah.
We really like Knives Out. Anything Agatha Christie.
And I did just make you watch Scrooge.
Yes. Yes. The George C. Scott. Yep. Absolutely. Well, sweetheart, I can't wait to look and search again, and you'll say we've seen it, and I'll say we haven't, and we'll find out who's right.
Christmas in July.
Maybe so. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, folks, please let us know. You can comment right wherever you're listening to this. You can comment with any suggestions you have, or you can send them to hellorcjr@gmail.com. Hello, rcjr@gmail.com. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll see you at the movies later tonight. I love you. Because we are given to self-interest, the first place our minds tend to go when hardship comes to town is bewilderment. We can't begin to understand how or why God would allow pain to come our way. Eventually, by His grace, we usually come to the place where we're willing to admit that God could use even our hardship for our good and for His glory. We, after all, have always been impressed by His creativity. We can't even make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. He can make sows, purses, and universes out of nothing. So, yes, when God gives us lemons, we'll cry our tears and then make the best of it by making some lemonade. What we don't often do, but ought always do, is look at the hardships He sends as opportunities. What if I told you that for weeks on end, the whole of the believing world would become obsessed with the distinct possibility of dying? What if I told you that we would have a whole month of Sundays when there would be no sports ball games clamoring for our attention? What if I told you that whole nations that bowed at the feet of their government leaders were about to find out their government leaders have feet of clay? Would you be excited to hear of these opportunities? Or would you miss them? John F. Kennedy, who was hardly a man known for great wisdom, said this. He said, "The Chinese use 2 brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity." The first part of that counsel is important. We do need to be aware of the danger. I'm not suggesting that when crisis comes, whether it comes in the form of COVID or an economic meltdown or some other unpleasantness, that we should go through our days with maniacal grins on our faces. I am saying, however, we should go beyond acknowledging that God can use hardship and instead give thanks for it, and looking for our calling in the midst of it. If we would live our lives coram Deo, before the face of God, then we had better Carpe Diem, seize the day. Friends, our Lord has appointed us as His stewards over His creation. When He returns, He will require of us an account of how we have managed the talents He has put in our hands. will we look at him as we look over this season of COVID and say, oh, what could I do? You sent such a crisis. Or will we instead be able to say, I saw the opportunity you gave us, and I moved forward with it. God tells us that it is the wicked who flee when none pursue. But the righteous are as bold as a lion. Proverbs 28:1. We, of all the men in this world, have been given by the God who made us a fear of him and a love that casts out every other fear. Our calling is to live in light of that truth, in good times and in bad, until he comes again. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.